The U.S. is headed for war in the Caribbean. I have tried to warn of this for the last year. I've tried to illustrate the problems, but in today's video I'm going to reveal some brand new information that I think a lot of people wouldn't know. Now, while digging through the history of Caribbean and Chinese and Russian influence down there, I came across this article from almost 20 years ago, talking about the UN seeking to strip the United States and UK of territories. UN reported that the UN is plotting to remove 15 strategic foreign possessions from the jurisdiction of the United States and the United Kingdom, this being done without the consent of the U.S. Senate as part of UN's International Decade for the Eradication of Colonialism. Now, I know a lot of you are familiar with the UN and what it does, but I'm going to show you something that is going to absolutely terrify you. It terrified me when I saw it, because it puts together the final pieces of the puzzle of why we are headed for war in the Caribbean. Now, down here, it talks about all of these different islands, and most of them have to do with different countries taking control of them, and where they are mostly is up north. But down here, it talks about new Russian islands. And when we get down to the bottom, this last paragraph, 4 South Pacific islands that were ceded to Kiribati in secret were McKen, Little, McKean, and Fanning, Nassau Island in the Pacific Ocean, and the Caribbean-based Bajo Nuevo and Serenilla Bank were also given away by the U.S. to Russia. Now you're asking me, well, Maki, what is that? What are those 2 little islands? How are they important? Well, where is Serenilla Bank and Bajo Nuevo? Well, we're going to zoom in here and show you. So there's Jamaica, and there's Nicaragua and Honduras. And over here are 2 little spits of land. And as we zoom in, lo and behold, there they are. Serenilla Bank and Bajo Nuevo are Russian territories. Now, let's zoom out. Do you see now the problem? What I'm going to try to do is illustrate this using this Microsoft Edge technique with markers to show you how the Russians, with their Chinese partners, are going to secure a corridor from Venezuela through the Panama Canal that the U.S. will not be able to do a thing about. Now, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can do this while I'm talking. We're going to denote Russia in black. Now, here is Serenilla Bank and Bajo Nuevo. We do know for a fact the Russians have assets here, here, and over here. Okay, not in dispute. Nicaragua, Managua has had Russian assets for a long time. We also know that there are Russian planes and assets here in Venezuela. Now, China. This is where things get a little bit more sticky. We're going to go ahead and also we're going to put a couple of black lines up here to mark Russian presence in Cuba. I don't think anybody would argue with that. Now, China. Most recently, China just flipped the Dominican Republic to no longer have relations with Taiwan. And they have been doing this with a great many nations down there. The very first one, 8 years ago, believe it or not, was Costa Rica. Here's Jamaica. Here's Haiti. 30 billion in Haiti. Now, Haiti, the Dominican, Jamaica. Let's go back to our map. We're going to go ahead and we're going to denote China in red. Jamaica, Haiti, Dominica, Costa Rica, we know that very recently the Panamanians also have decided that they will no longer recognize Taiwan. And what this really means, and everybody knows what this means, Taiwan represents the United States. We're going to represent Venezuelan tankers in green. So we have Venezuelan tankers over here in Venezuelan waters. We'll represent U.S. assets in blue. We have them here. Colombia. I know that looks more purple, but it's just the way the screen is. So I think a lot of people can see what's going on. And you can look this up on your own as well. Go back to red here for a minute. The Chinese have also made inroads in Dominica, St. Lucia, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago. So here's what they've done. See, I don't think it was any secret to anyone that Venezuela was going to head for a default, that the U.S. was going to do this. Because the U.S. needed to, when the U.S. decided it wasn't going to be an oil exporter, way back in the 70s during the crisis, the world moved on, and everybody took their place in the world export market except for the United States. So in 2015, when the United States decided to join back in the export market, the problem was this: where were they going to fit without completely destroying the delicate balance? Anything they would do would automatically drive the prices down just by joining the market, that new source. So what did they have to do? They had to destroy Venezuela and take their spot. And Venezuela was one of these countries that wasn't allowing the U.S. DEA and CIA and Homeland Security to come in and take over their country. They weren't allowing big U.S. oil interests to come in and take over. And that's why the U.S. hatched a plot with the Saudis to destroy Venezuela. And you can look this up on your own. 2014, there was a vote in OPEC as to whether to tighten up the supply to keep prices higher or to glut the market and drive them down. They voted to ratchet up production, glut the market. Everybody voted for it except for 3 countries: Iran, Venezuela, and Algeria. So all of this issue in Venezuela was artificially created. It was an artificial dump in the price of oil to bankrupt this country. But the Chinese figured it out. And this is what they're going to do. If ConocoPhillips decides they're going to want to try to go into Venezuelan waters and take any Venezuelan assets, all these ships are going to have to do is sail from Venezuela up to Dominican waters. The U.S. will have no way to get to them. In Haiti, in Jamaica. Now here's where there would normally be a problem. Sailing out in the Caribbean Sea, U.S. vessels could seize the tankers, but these are Russian islands. All they have to do is now go over to Nicaragua, Costa Rica, down through the canal, and out. Where I'm sure over here will be waiting Chinese and Russian assets waiting to escort them. Because as we know, the Chinese and the Russians have great relations with these countries. Now do you see why I have been talking about getting your relatives, getting anybody you care about out of Panama and Costa Rica? This is what's going to happen. There's going to be an event where U.S. warships, on behalf of big oil, are going to attempt to interdict Venezuelan tankers who will be protected by Chinese and Russian assets. This is where the war is going to begin. Right here. That canal. I'm going to go ahead and pull up one final story that I was reading that pretty much, and pardon my computer for taking forever here. It talks about China's expanding presence in the Caribbean. And this is a picture from Trinidad and Tobago. It talks about the amount of money that they've put in down there. And about how all of the loans and all the infrastructure that the Chinese have put down there have come at a cost to these nations. They're pretty much beholden to China now. They're not going to be able to refuse China when China says, okay, look, when these Venezuelan ships show up, you are going to protect them from the U.S., period. You're going to allow our vessels to do whatever we want to do. And I'll read for you here. Along similar lines, China has dramatically expanded investment in Cuba despite the conspicuous lack of their relationship during the Cold War. Trade between the two countries has increased since 2015, and China now trails only Venezuela as the second largest exporter to Cuba. In addition to these exports and loans, Chinese firms have invested in Cuban infrastructure with projects such as renewable energy and research centers and Hawaii Wi-Fi hotspots. Militarily, the Chinese PLA shares intelligence and training sessions with the Cuban military. Chinese tourists now can smoke basically Cuban cigars, Beijing Havana, and those are just a few of the most prominent examples of China's growing Caribbean footprint: Barbados, Grenada, Guyana, and Panama. This is what I'm talking about. Now, the reason I brought up this article, where it talks about the military, Chinese military, China's Caribbean outreach also has a military dimension. For example, Trinidad and Tobago recently purchased naval patrol vessels from the PLA. Likewise, China has provided equipment such as tents, uniforms, binoculars to the Jamaican military. The Bahamas, Barbados, Dominica, and Guyana have also discussed military collaboration with the PLA. So this has been going on for a while. And I will leave with this. And this article literally sounds like something I said like a month ago. Despite the region's plentiful golf courses and proximity to Mar-a-Lago, the Trump administration has placed little emphasis on the Caribbean. Former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson did not travel to the area until a February 2018 visit to Jamaica, well over a year after his appointment. In contrast, his counterpart, Wang Yi, has met with more Caribbean foreign ministers than Secretary Tillerson did. Tillerson's successor, Mike Pompeo, has expressed little interest in the region aside from a reflexively negative reaction to any semblance of engagement with Cuba. Likewise, President Trump has alienated Caribbean nations with his tweets on topics such as climate change and race relations. The Trump administration even has a fraught relationship with its own Caribbean holding, Puerto Rico, catalyzed by the president's petty personal barbs with San Juan's mayor. Overall, many Caribbean leaders perceive that the United States has neglected the region while China has embraced it. This is what I'm talking about. It is the perception down there. Whether you believe it about the Twitter or not, Whether you agree with his take on the Caribbean or not, this is the case. This is what they see us as. They see us as this haughty, high-minded, arrogant, self-involved country that doesn't want to be bothered with the problems of little petty shithole island nations, other than when we want to go down and, lay on the beach and get drunk. That's how they see us. So this is why the issue in Venezuela is going to happen. All these little islands over here I just talked about, if they have to make a choice between the U.S. and China, guess who they choose? Venezuela's already made its choice. And this issue with Puerto Rico, I don't know. Dominican just signed the deals with China. Haiti, Jamaica, we just found out these two little banks are Russian assets. Nicaragua, falling apart. Communist. In bed with the Russians. We talked about the ships in Managua. Costa Rica doesn't recognize Taiwan. Panama the same way. And all we have left down here is one of the most violent, war-torn countries in all of South America that can barely hold itself together. We're just going to have to sit back and watch, because the rest of the region has basically been turned over to Russia and China. And the Admiral of the 4th Fleet pretty much told us this when he says, I only have assets to interdict 1 in 4. Most of the ships that I use to do my job are Coast Guard vessels. So ConocoPhillips loses. And Venezuela and China and Russia win. I don't know how you see it any other way. But there will be a standoff. And there will be a problem. Mark my words. Like, share, subscribe.